Hi, I'm Dr. Susan Strauss, and I'm a consultant, I'm an author, I'm an investigator in the area of bullying and harassment with schools and with workplaces. And I'm here to talk to you today about the difference between bullying and harassment. There's a lot of confusion about them, particularly when we think about the behavior that's going on in the schools. The media, schools, parents, and public in general tend to label almost all of the student misconduct as bullying, when in fact a good share of it is not bullying, but rather harassment based on a student's protected class. Now, what does that mean? A protected class, it refers to a group that we all belong to that is protected from discrimination. So, for example, one of my protected classes is my sex, I'm female. Another one is my race, I'm Caucasian. My color, I'm white. But others would be disability, religion, and so forth. So when we talk about bullying in schools, we've got to make sure that we differentiate between misconduct that truly is bullying compared to misconduct that is harassment based on a student's protected class. So let's look at how do we define those. And therein lies part of the problem, at least for bullying. We do not have a consistent definition of bullying. You can take a look at a number of different articles that are written about bullying. We even have 46 states right now that have anti-bullying legislation, and yet many of those states define it differently. Researchers define it differently, so we don't have a consistent definition. But let me just say a few things about what specific behaviors are generally associated with bullying. First of all, bullying is persistent. It's repeated. It's very often a malicious and offensive type of behavior that results in degrading the target of the behavior, makes them feel demeaned, they lose their dignity, their self-esteem is diminished. But bullying occurs just because somebody doesn't like you. Maybe you don't wear your hair the way they'd like you to. Maybe, in fact, you don't dress the way other students think you should dress. One group of students that tends to be bullied quite frequently are those that are overweight. So overweight bullying has become quite an issue. But bullying is not illegal, and harassment is. Harassment is illegal because it is a violation of students' civil rights. So let's take a look at that for a minute. There's the Title IX, which you probably typically think of as dealing with sports, which it does, making sure that there's equality between males and females in sports. But Title IX is much broader than that. Title IX includes equality with boys and girls in school, and that includes discrimination far beyond sports, but in the classroom, and it also includes harassment. We also have other laws that are both federal and state, and in some cases there are municipality laws. Let me give you an example. I did an interview the other day for a radio show in Kansas, and they specifically wanted me to address bullying of GLBT students. So I decided to check and see if Kansas recognized GLBT as a protected class, and they don't. However, there were some cities in Kansas that do. So make sure when you think about bullying and harassment that you look not only at protected classes by federal law, but also your state law and your local law as well. We have a bill that's being introduced in Congress right now called the Student Non-Discrimination Act, which is going to be working on making sure that students that are GLBT will not be discriminated against. But that's for another one of your YouTubes. The OCR's website is available at the bottom of your screen. And what I'd encourage you to do is go on the website, and there are a number of documents that I would recommend that you read to acquaint yourself with harassment. One of them is called the Guidance, and if you type in guidance in OCR regarding sexual harassment, it will come up. There's another document that deals with a letter that the OCR, Office for Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Education, and I will refer to them as OCR, that they sent out to all schools in the country back in October of 2010. That letter reminded school districts that not all student misconduct does in fact constitute bullying, and that schools must conduct an investigation when students come forward to complain. That investigation is to determine whether or not a student has in fact been bullied or whether or not a student is being harassed because of their protected class. And very often it's harassment based on the student's sex, based on their disability is a common one, religion, their color, their race, and their national origin. Those seem to be some of the most common. Now, when we talk about defining harassment, I've already defined bullying for you. Let's look at the definition of harassment. Harassment is any unwelcome behavior, and it must be severe and or pervasive enough that it interferes with the student's ability to get an equal education. And the standard that we use is any reasonable student. The behavior also needs to be either sexual or gender-based, or if we're talking about other protected classes, the behavior or the misconduct directed towards that student needs to be based on the fact of their color, their national origin, their disability, etc. The other thing that has to occur to make it illegal in the schools is we have welcomeness, has to be severe and or pervasive, based on any other reasonable student. It has to interfere with the student's ability to get an equal education, and it has to be based on their protected class. In order for it to be illegal in the schools, it also has to show that the school demonstrated something called deliberate indifference. Now, while the courts have to determine exactly what that means, deliberate indifference really is referring to the fact that the school just was so indifferent to the complaint made by the student that they either did no investigation, a minimal investigation, or maybe they just didn't respond at all. Schools must, according to Title IX and other state and national laws, make harassment stop. They must do that. They have to take reasonable steps to make the harassment stop. The key here is reasonable steps. So what might that mean? It could mean separating the students. It could mean transferring a student to another school within the district. It could mean doing discipline with the offender. Any number of things, but the school must take reasonable steps to make sure that the behavior, the misconduct that is harassment, stops. Now, it's important to be able to differentiate what harassment is in that just because a student might be called a derogatory name, or there might be some derogatory comments that are made to the student, or that there is a dirty joke, for example, in and of itself does not make that illegal harassment. So it has to be, again, severe and or pervasive enough that it really does interfere with the student's ability to get an equal education. So that's the legal aspect of what constitutes harassment. Now, hopefully those of you that are listening, whether you are a student, whether you are an educator, or whether you are a parent, now have a little bit better idea about what the differences are between bullying and harassment, as well as what the school's responsibility is. They must receive the complaint. They must conduct an investigation to determine whether or not the behavior is, in fact, misconduct based on a student's protected class, or if it is bullying. The other thing that schools should be doing is education regarding bullying, certainly, but also harassment of all protected classes. In fact, the Office of Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Ed, requires that schools do harassment training. Now, what I'm finding in my work as an expert witness in lawsuits is that very often schools are not necessarily conducting training of students or of faculty and staff on harassment, but rather they are doing only bullying education. Now, bullying education needs to occur. It's a major problem in the schools, but schools must be doing education for students, staff, administrators, and faculty on harassment, what their responsibility is, how to conduct investigations, etc. So, what we've discussed today is those differences. Every day, students are being bullied and harassed in school. Unfortunately, it begins in kindergarten and it extends all the way through 12th grade. Hopefully, this has given you an idea of how to differentiate between bullying and harassment so that you can be a student that's either well-informed, a school employee that's well-informed, and a parent that's well-informed. For further information and resources about bullying and harassment in the schools, please visit my website at straussconsulting.net. Thank you.